Hi everybody, welcome back to another Pixelworlds video. Today, welcome to Perks Part 2. This is basically the video where I go through the last 15 perks. I did a previous 15 perks video, and I go through the best uses for each perk, so let's get right into it. The first perk is Heavy Hit. This perk is just not worth a perk slot due to being a lower hit frequency, as well as not being very useful for PvE modes or PvP because hit frequency is much more important than damage. The one use I could see with this perk is dealing damage to the nether boss though, as people camp on one of the bottom corners and hit the boss once at a time to slowly whittle him down. The next perk, Fish On, is infinitely useful for fishing. Obviously use this for fishing for gems, good for fishing for tournaments as well, due to needing as many fish as possible in a short amount of time. The next perk, Bullseye, is great for any PvE mode or PvP mode where you're using a ranged weapon. I recommend pairing this with anything like the Galactic Champion Rifle or Arasaka in Secret Base. The next perk, Elemental Armor, isn't that important in PvP as long as you have good damage per second, so this will most likely be useful for PvP. If you find yourself dying off into the nether boss though, it could be worth it to use this. The next perk, Bad Bowels, obviously is not, it doesn't serve any buff other than to be cosmetic. However, it could potentially be used to get attention in trade worlds or distract in Spleef due to the jumping creating more noise on your screen. The next perk, Healthy Hit, could potentially be useful in the nether. If you avoid taking damage to clear lots of enemies, it could be paired with healing potions to do well against the nether boss or other modes as well. The next perk, Quest Hoarder, is one of the best perks in the game. You get a new quest every 2 hours instead of 4, making XP, gems, and Bitcoins significantly easier to get. I recommend using this perk as one of your 5 slots every chance you can get. The next perk, Critical Strike. Paired with a weapon like the Green Laser Sword or Arasaka, this doesn't matter too much. But if you're using something like the Club of the Hydra, this perk can be very good for Secret Base and Netherworld clearing. It's also very good for the Nether boss, as dealing as much damage as possible without dying is key. The one caveat to this perk, of course, is that a lot of the best weapons in the game don't use any crit, such as the Laser Sword and the Arasaka like I said. Booster, which is the next perk, is pretty obvious of what you should use this for. You should use it whenever opening mass amounts of boosters. However, I recommend mostly to use this for seasonal boosters because current booster items that are high in rarity don't really have that much value. The next perk, Kamikaze, is fine to use for Secret Base and Netherworld runs, as it's not super important to have a lot of health as long as your armor is good and you're good at avoiding damage, because perks are very useful for improving your overall damage per second. You can boost your damage by 23% using perks alone. Kamikaze, Fierce Companion, Here Comes the Pain, and Bullseye or Melee Madness depending on what weapon you're using. 73% if using Heavy Hit, which I don't recommend using unless fighting the nether boss like I've said. The next perk, Exploding Guts, is not a super helpful perk due to there being other alternatives that can be much more helpful for combat, but it could potentially be useful for the knockback that could help in Spleef to eliminate enemies that are still standing after you die, because the knockback from this perk cannot be turned off unless using the Immovable perk. Speaking of the Immovable perk, Immovable is infinitely useful when fighting any PvE enemy, especially the boss, considering his first stage practically completely stuns you if you aren't careful when dodging his gun attack, as well as being good for Spleef that allows hitting, as this can make it so you can't be punched off of a block. This perk may also be useful in PvP to be able to continuously hit or chase an enemy without being pushed back. The next perk, Fierce Companion, is only really good if you want the best damage perk build. This perk is necessary for it, but 3% more damage is not very helpful in almost any situation, though it could potentially make the difference between a kill or a death in PvP. I wouldn't recommend using this unless you are purposely trying to get the highest amount of damage you can possibly get. The next perk, Confusing Blow, is super useful in PvP, as it's rare to see anyone using this perk, and it has an element of surprise when used on an enemy, taking them a second to realize that their controls are inverted. I could see this also being very useful in spleefs that have hitting turned on, due to it being very annoying and difficult to move the opposite way for a temporary amount of time. Finally, Stockbroker. This is the final perk you'll unlock at level 150. This perk basically gives more bite coins to you when you sell an item, as well as making items that are available to purchase cheaper, but only by 1%. This can be valuable when trying to complete the buying and selling Pixel World Exchange achievements, because you lose less bite coins, but only by a small amount. As well as this, creating expensive sales, such as selling 50 world locks for 17,500 bite coins, which is a very common, sale, it can make it much more lucrative, which is another way to complete those achievements. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day. See ya.